Happy to.
I'll go mute.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Chris Manganiello. I'm Chattahoochee Riverkeeper's Water Policy Director. Glad to have you all here this evening. Jillian's asked me to be here to kind of talk a little bit about advocacy, how to be an advocate, and also talk about some of the issues that Chattahoochee Riverkeeper has been working on with some of our partners kind of all over the state. So let me go ahead and I'm going to share a screen here. And you're looking at the presentation mode there, Jillian? Cool, good. Awesome, great. Well, thanks again, everybody, for being here this evening. I know we've all got a lot going on, and evening can be a kind of a premium time in all of our lives. Yeah, so I'm Chris Manganiello. I'm Chattahoochee Riverkeeper's Water Policy Director, and I want to talk to you a little bit today about how to be a better advocate, or how to get what you want, and kind of talk through some advocacy tools that you can use, as well as some issues. But first, I wanted to just say a little bit about Chattahoochee Riverkeeper, just as a kind of reminder. I think all of you know some of this stuff, but we are an environmental nonprofit. We were established in 1994. The Chattahoochee Riverkeeper is a part of a much larger family of water keepers, river keepers, bay keepers, coast keepers all over the world. There are about 350 keepers, if you will, and Chattahoochee Riverkeeper was the 11th water keeper to join that group that is now 300 strong. Our organization, Chattahoochee Riverkeeper, has about 9,000 members or so. And we have, where our headquarters office is in Atlanta. We also have an office in Gainesville, in North Georgia, LaGrange, down in Troup County. And we've actually opened another laboratory down in Columbus. That just happened like a week or so ago. So I need to change my slide. So yeah, we've got about a dozen staff or so spread out across those different locations. And organizationally, we do a lot of different things. On the far left there, you see a picture of somebody kind of pointing at a pipe, and that pipe that's a broken sewer line. So that pipe used to go like across a creek, but it broke. And one of the reasons that we found it is we have a really large program called Neighborhood Water Watch. We have volunteers that go out and take water quality samples in creeks and streams all over the Chattahoochee River watershed, everywhere from once a week to maybe once a month. And then they bring those samples into our lab, and we can test them for bacteria, and then we can use that monitoring to find sewer leaks like this. And then we pick up the telephone and we call somebody, the city or the jurisdiction that's responsible for the pipe, and let them know where the problem is, and then they go out and fix it. So this is a program we've had for about 10 years, and it's really an instrumental program for helping to keep the Chattahoochee River clean. That is our mission, is to make sure there's enough clean water in the Chattahoochee River for all the people in the communities that need it, as well as for the natural environment as well. We also have a lot of different education programs. Water Warriors is a great example of that. And certainly we have these other programs that it's called the Floating Classroom. We have 2 large pontoon boats. We take folks out on Lake Lanier and West Point Lake, teach elementary, junior high school students about the water cycle, and do some water monitoring as well. And then we've also got that's the picture on the far right there. That's me. I do a lot of our advocacy work, including going down to the state legislature during the General Assembly when they are meeting January through March, and engage with our decision makers at the state level, kind of elected leaders. But I also engage with decision makers at our state environmental agency. The Georgia Environmental Protection Division is the primary agency we work a lot with, which is also kind of a part of the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. So that's kind of Chattahoochee Riverkeeper in a nutshell, kind of some of the programs we do, and the like. But today, as I kind of mentioned at the top, we want to talk about advocacy. And I think, certainly, we're an environmental organization. We go out and we're going to advocate for the environment and the communities that depend on the Chattahoochee River. and obviously advocate for the river itself. You're here because, environmental and natural resources matter to you. But what I'm getting ready to tell you about in terms of, finding legislators or finding decision makers and how to engage with them, it really, it's applicable to any issue that you may want to work on one day, whether or not it has, something else to do with the environment, or maybe it's going to have to do with some other issue, some other social issue that is something that's important to you. So, essentially, what matters to you is what drives your, and what is your kind of motivating factor. It's what calls to you to have some sort of emotional connection to something, right? Maybe it's just the fish in the water, or maybe it's because you like to drink water, or maybe you want to clean things up and help with trash pickups, or maybe it's has to do with recreation and getting out on the water and paddling, or on the bottom, maybe maybe it's all of these things kind of baked together, and how to address climate change, and to kind of make sure that we have access and are able to do all these other things that I have pictures of. But the point is again, it's just like knowing what matters to you, and then being driven to engage and take action for it. That's the key there. Things that we care about the most are the easiest to advocate for, to defend, and to promote. So anyway, that's just kind of like just kind of a blanket statement. What we're here to learn about in terms of advocacy can be applied to kind of whatever thing it is that really jazzes you and gets you interested in protecting it or advocating for it. So this is kind of a real brief civics kind of lesson here, which if you've taken government in school and high school before, this may look familiar, right? But it's government 101. Who makes decisions? At the local and the state level, our decision makers, you can bring it all the way down to kind of your city council. If you live in the city of Atlanta or any other city, your city will have a city government. There's a city council. There'll be a president of that council, and then you would also presumably have a mayor within that city as well. So at the city level, you kind of have that structure. The next level up at the county level, it's similar. There's a county commission. There'll be multiple commissioners represent all the constituents of your county, whether or not it's Cobb County, Gwinnett, DeKalb, or some other county. It's county commission. There'll be one of those commissioners will be the chair of the commission, and that's the kind of the county level. The Georgia General Assembly, in some ways, is, if you're familiar with how the federal government works, it's very similar. There's in the Georgia General Assembly, there's two chambers. There's the House of Representatives and the Senate. There's kind of different leadership levels within each of those chambers at the House of Representatives and the Senate. And then, of course, not unlike city council, where you may have a mayor of your city. In the state, we also, our executive level is the governor. But again, that's just kind of starting from that super local level, the city council, all the way up to the kind of the governor of the state level, in terms of how to think about who your local and state decision makers are. And I'm breaking it down like this because, again, what I'm going to talk about in terms of how to engage with some of these decision makers, it's applicable to all these different levels. Like what I'm getting ready to tell you, like it's not just for your city council people, or it's not just necessarily for General Assembly members. Kind of figuring out how to find them, and then how to kind of tailor your message. That's all applicable to all these different levels. It doesn't really matter specifically which one. And then at the federal level, of course, we've got similar. We got our congressional delegation is made up of members of the House of Representatives and Congress, as well as our U.S. senators here in Georgia, and then of course the executive is the president. So in some ways, it's nice that our nation, for the most part, has very similar kind of decision-making levels, and all of these people are elected. Chattahoochee Riverkeeper is a nonprofit 501c3, so we don't get involved directly in elections. We don't, we won't endorse candidates, but what we can do is essentially what I'm doing right now. Is I'm I'm educating folks about, the work that we do, as well as helping folks understand the process that, you go through to get to, to talk to these different decision makers. But yeah, just kind of keep that in mind. Who makes these decisions is, is going to vary at these different levels. These are all elected individuals, which means as a constituent of them, they will want to talk to you, right? They want to hear from their constituents and understand what matters to their constituents. And it's, I'll kind of talk about this a little bit more, but really almost every elected official will tell you, or will tell me, that one of the most important ways for them to engage with their constituents is face-to-face and to actually have conversation. We can all send emails, we can do action alerts and send those off to elected officials. We can send postcards, all those kind of different ways, both through social media and traditional kind of print stuff. All that stuff is helpful, but again, most of these decision makers who are elected will tell you that having a one-on-one engagement with their constituent is really one of the most impactful. It is that way because when a constituent takes the time to find a legislator or elected official, and then kind of seek them out, carve out time to spend time with a elected decision maker, that is a signal to that individual, that elected individual, that the constituent has something that's important to share and to communicate, and there's a reason for it. So that's kind of the basics of kind of little civics there. Anybody who's out there have any questions right now before I move on? All right. So how do you find your decision makers? Well, it's, again, kind of, thinking about who you're trying to find. Let's say you live in the county of Gwinnett, you can search for the Gwinnett County Board of Commissioners, and then on their website, they're going to have a Find My District Commissioner link, right? And you can click on that, and I'm going to try this, see if this works. You can tell me if, can you see that, Jillian, the actual webpage for Gwinnett County? Okay, great. So, you can find your commissioner, they have their names here, and then you can figure out which one is yours, and then actually, yeah, that's right. So if you enter your address here, so you live in Gwinnett County, you enter your address, and it'll basically pull up who your actual commissioner is. I don't live in Gwinnett County, so I can't do that, but I will go back to here. I live in the city of Atlanta. These are all the city council members in Atlanta. You can find district maps. Oh, there we go. Oh, I thought that was going to actually open up the district maps. I apologize. I thought I had the right link in there. We're going to see whether or not the city of Atlanta is just going to kind of put me on rinse and repeat. Yeah, sorry. So this would have supposed to bring up a GIS map, and then I could type in my address, and then it tells me who my city council member is. But we're going to move on because I don't want to sit there and stall out for too long. Because then this will make a little bit more sense as I go forward with kind of like the next stage here. But nonetheless, you can go to whatever level of decision maker you're trying to find, whether it's city council or county commission, and they have tools on their websites to actually figure out which commissioner or legislator represents you. You would just simply enter your address, and it pulls up the individual's name, and then you should be able to link back to find their biography and find their contact information, like their phone numbers and their actual mailing address, as well as an email address. That's the city and council and community in the city and county government level. But how do you find folks, say, in the Georgia General Assembly or the U.S. Congress? And this is something that for folks that are watching right now, if you just shoot your QR code, the one I have on the screen, it'll come up with what's the pluralpolicy.com is the website, and it'll say find your local legislator. And if you are doing that right now, you can go ahead and punch in your address. And it should bring up a list of your state legislators as well as your federal legislators. I have little pictures of them, thumbnail pictures, their names, their district, and what chamber they're a part of. So again, this is a way to find your Georgia General Assembly legislators in the Senate and in the House, as well as your federal legislators, which would be your 2 U.S. senators, as well as your U.S. Congress representative. And you can click on their names, and it'll bring up their contact information. And I'm going to show you another way to do this for the Georgia General Assembly, because there's a little bit more information as well. But again, this is one way to find your state and federal federal representatives. So does anybody have any questions about that? If folks trying that? Okay. All right. So let's say you found them. Now what do you do? Right? You found the name, found the individual. If you're, let's say you were trying to find your Georgia representative. Let's just, I'm going to pick this first person right here. Let's say, Mike Cameron was your legislator. You go to Mike Cameron's webpage. You can find his address, phone number, email address, and figure out who. Sometimes they have bios, and Representative Cameron does not have his bio. It would normally be right here on this first page. Sorry, I didn't pick a good one for there. Let's see, Katie Dempsey should have one. Yes. Can you all see this? Yeah, so you can look up their bio, right? And like, why do we want to look up their bio? Well, it's helpful to have a understanding of who these people are. And maybe you know who they are, but in general, kind of reading about the decision maker is important, because it may provide you with some conversation topics that might, illustrate that maybe you know somebody who goes to the same church, because they'll say inevitably what church they go to. So in researching the decision maker, it gives you ideas about who they are as a person. And that's important to understand, that all of these elected officials, regardless of kind of whether they're city council or they're in Congress, they're all human beings, and they all have lives. Most of them have families. And so it's just important to, understand who they are as human beings. And that helps kind of facilitate conversation, because again, you may see there's some things you have in common that you may not have realized. So all part of preparation, aside from researching the decision maker, is, once you've kind of figured out who they are, where they are, you decide you want to reach out to them, you can go ahead and contact the office. Phone is probably the fastest way, picking up the telephone and calling. Certainly email works as well. But regardless of whether it's, it's an email or you're picking up the phone, just be super nice. You say, I am so-and-so, I am a constituent, I live in the district, and it's really important that I meet with this decision maker because I would like to talk about an important issue. They might ask, what the issue is generally, and you could just give something really short and sweet. But in that sense, you want to prepare some sort of elevator speech. You want to have a pretty quick explanation about why you want to meet and what you would like to talk about. Also part of the preparation is, maybe you have some leave behinds or fact sheets or some other material that you think is important and related to your issue. Those are the types of things you can prepare. Once you've got your meeting set up, you can prepare that stuff, and it helps also in the process of putting those things together. It'll probably help you with your elevator speech as well. And then, it seems really boring, but understanding logistics, like where am I going to park? How long is it going to take me to get there? Because you want to be on time. Understanding the building layout. You can ask these types of questions usually ahead of time. Whoever you set the meeting up with, they can tell you if there's anything special you need to know about getting into or out of the building and that kind of stuff. So that's all part of preparation. But I would really say kind of understanding the legislator and decision maker that you're going to meet with is really important in that whole process. So you found them, you've done your preparation, you've set up your meeting, you know where you're going, and then you travel to the meeting. It's really important always to be nice to every single person you meet. That when you first walk into the decision maker's office, the first person you see probably won't necessarily be the decision maker, but it could be the person who was the scheduler that helped you get the meeting. It could be maybe kind of the gatekeeper to the decision maker that it really influences the decision maker's choices on policy issues and positions. And so it's just be nice to everybody. You never know how that person that you're engaging with might be able to help you down the road. So just treat everybody as you would like to be treated, but maybe even more so in these situations. Always show up, and it's important to be passionate, but also I was kind of giving a similar talk like this a few nights ago, and folks were saying, hey, look, be nice, but you can be passionate, but don't kind of take it to crazy town. You just really want to be as objective as you can. But the meeting, certainly introduce yourself, say, where you're from. You can begin the conversation with, hey, maybe you have a shared neighborhood. Maybe you both go to the same park or the same church, or there's some other connection. But kind of beginning the conversation with establishing a connection that you and the legislator or decision maker might have is really important too. And kind of once you've kind of moved on from that, as we like to say, the chit chat of maybe 10 minutes or so of chit chat, then you can discuss your issue. And I would really encourage folks to keep it to one. If you get 30 minutes with a legislator or decision maker, that's a lot of time. So you just also, I guess at the beginning of a meeting, it's always nice to say, hey, I just want to make sure I know how much time we have, to be respectful of everybody's time. But you want to be able to discuss your issue pretty quickly. Again, have that nice elevator speech. Think about what sort of questions they might ask you, and then you can do two things with that. Like if you have a sense of what someone's going to ask you, you can either tailor your elevator speech to make sure you answer those questions, or you can have your elevator speech kind of laid out in such a way that it kind of leads them to ask specific questions, and then the answer to them. And so it's just, you can kind of move through something relatively quickly. Once you've kind of discussed the issue and you really want to ask them, you want to ask that decision maker, what do you think? Do you think this is something you could support? And really good decision makers will tell you, straight off, yes, I can, or no, I can, and maybe they'll tell you why. Others might say, I'm familiar with this issue, but I don't really have a position yet. And then that opens up the opportunity for you to say, well, what is it that you need, you think, to make a decision? Can I help you with anything? And this is also that moment where, if they start asking questions about whatever issue you're working on, if you don't know the answer, please don't make anything up. Tell them, I will find out the answer to that question and I will get back to you. It's just important to always be honest and transparent through all these meetings. And, if you don't know the answer to something, just say, I don't know, but I will find out the answer for you. What is the best way for me to get that information to you? How can I answer your question? And that's all part of being a good listener. Is like, understanding, what you know and what you don't know, and, really being a resource to this particular decision maker on an issue that they may not know very much about, which could be a good thing for you because you're able to provide them with information that they might not otherwise have or know how to get. So that's really the meeting in a nutshell. Be nice, be a good listener, offer to help, but certainly you want to, like, the whole reason you went there is to try to understand where this individual might be on this issue. So you certainly want to ask them that question. Then thank yous. Once you're done, certainly, thank everybody who helped make the meeting possible in person that you can thank. And then, when you get home, you can certainly send an electronic message, but it's also nice, and I would recommend sending a thank you card of some sort to their office. So those are kind of the nutshell. That's the nutshell of, how to prepare for and how to kind of move through a meeting with a decision maker. Again, it doesn't have to be on an environmental or natural resource topic. Like, this stuff applies really to any kind of meeting with a legislator. And I know a lot of the folks in the Water Wars program, maybe you're not 18 yet, but in some ways it doesn't matter, and maybe it's even more important that you're not, because you're almost going to be 18 and you're going to be a voter soon, and these decision makers should still care about that and understand that they have the opportunity to meet with and understand what someone who's about to be a voter cares about, and that I think is important. Does anybody have any questions about this? All right.
I don't have any questions, but what I wanted to say is that, yeah, I agree with what you said. I think that being more open and having like a more personal conversation with like a constituent is a great way of being able to take the first step and, helping them provide change and make a difference.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Thomas. So this slide is really just to articulate that Chattahoochee Riverkeeper is a member of what's called the Georgia Water Coalition. The Georgia Water Coalition is a group, is a coalition of other environmental organizations all over the state, and we primarily work on water issues, as the name implies. And this includes the statewide organizations like Sierra Club, Environment Georgia, Georgia River Network, Georgia Wildlife Federation, as well as the 10 or so other river keepers all over the state, local watershed groups, farmers, religious faith-based groups, companies, kind of small local companies in Georgia. All of us have been working together for about 20 years, primarily on water issues and on issues at the state capitol. So the Chattahoochee Riverkeeper and all these other groups, we kind of set an agenda and work on a couple of different issues, which I'm actually going to talk through some of them in just a minute, that we work on a kind of an annual basis. And we work on state level environmental and advocacy and climate work. And certainly kind of an easy way to stay up to date on kind of some of the issues that we're working on is you can sign up for these Protect Georgia action alerts by just signing up at that QR code that I've got on the screen. These are, we send out action alerts mostly during the legislative session, but also on other issues. If there is something that we need lots of folks to take action on relatively quickly, maybe a particular bill is moving through the General Assembly and we want to make sure that legislators hear from constituents. The way these action alerts are set up is not unlike how I was kind of showing you how to find a legislator. when you sign up for the action alerts, you'll get the alert and you kind of punch in your address, and then it generates a message for you to send directly to your local legislator. And so, we again mostly use these during the legislative session, but we also use them outside of the legislative session on other issues that kind of permit decisions on regulatory matters, kind of all over Georgia. So yeah, that's a great way to kind of stay up to date on some of the hot button issues that we're working on. We also organize a in-person Capital Conservation Day. It's usually in February. This is a situation where it's an event where we invite folks, like all the folks you see standing on the Capitol steps there. They all came down. We meet about 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, have a little breakfast. We talk about a couple issues that are important for folks to understand and to advocate on. We explain to folks how you do lobbying, not unlike what I just talked through. A lot of the same strategies and tools. We do a training session on an issue. We do a kind of how do you lobby legislators, and then we walk folks across the street from our meeting location into the Capitol and help folks attend meetings with their state House representative and senator. We usually have 100 or so people that participate in this every year. And again, legislators tell us that this is kind of one of the most useful ways for them to interact with their constituents on issues that matter to them. And so we don't have a date set right now, because usually we wait for the General Assembly to get started, and then once we have an idea of what their calendar looks like, we pick a time that we think is the kind of most ripe, if you will, to hold our event. But that is something you can keep track of with the Georgia Water Coalition. We're up on social media as well, and that's one of the ways you can stay aware of what we're working on. But yeah, Protect Georgia Action Alerts and Capital Conservation Day are 2 great ways to get involved on these 3 issues I'm going to talk about that the Water Coalition has been working on with partners all over the state. And so one of them, maybe you've heard about, the Okefenokee is a national wildlife refuge down in southwest Georgia, down basically on the Florida-Georgia line, not far from Brunswick, Georgia, and Jacksonville, Florida. The Okefenokee is a national wildlife refuge. It's been a refuge since the 1930s. And it's a really pretty special place. And it is threatened right now from a strip mine that would, some mining that would take place just outside the national refuge boundary. And what we have been working on is an initiative to protect the wild heart of Georgia. And the goal is to pass a bill that's called House Bill 71. And this particular bill prohibits future mining in a very limited area adjacent to the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge. And so the idea here is that, or the concern, I should say, is that the mining on just outside of the National Wildlife Refuge could have really negative impacts on the water levels in the National Wildlife Refuge, and that if we see the mining happening and the water levels drop and the wildlife refuge becomes a drier place, what it makes the refuge more susceptible to is drought and wildfire. If during drought, if the refuge dries up, it can be more susceptible to wildfire, and those wildfires historically are not contained just to the swamp, so it could have a negative impact on private property outside of the refuge. So it's just important to understand that this House Bill 71 would only limit mining in one very specific place in the state of Georgia. It would have no impact on mining in other parts of the state. And it's also important to understand is that, folks that live, in this area where there would be no mining allowed, they'd still have the ability to use their property in really any other way they see fit. But the reason, again, that protecting the Okefenokee is important is, at least from the Water Coalition's perspective, is that, and we want to make sure that the water levels in the swamp remain, the appropriate level to support this wildlife refuge, which is it's on the flyway. It is a wildlife refuge because it's visited by birds that are migrating. Certainly, there's all sorts of critters that live in the swamp. There's a local tourism economy that the swamp helps support. So there are a lot of reasons not to mess with the Okefenokee, and ultimately House Bill 71 would protect the wild heart of Georgia in the swamp. And the QR code here that I've got is, it'll just take you to a Georgia Water Coalition webpage that has all sorts of information about the Okefenokee, FAQs, to kind of really like drill down into details, which I will not do tonight, because we could be here for a long time talking about all that stuff. But yeah, I would encourage you to take a look at that, and you can reach out to me if you have other questions about that or other issues. Another issue we've been working on has to do with this thing called soil amendments. And soil amendments are kind of like fertilizers. They're these things that you can mix into the soil to improve the soil's ability to for agricultural purposes. But what we have discovered is that there's a regulatory program for soil amendments in the state of Georgia it's a pretty weak program. It doesn't do a good job of controlling what goes into a soil amendment. And so for many years, people have been applying soil amendments, which are really just industrial wastes, but they're disguising them as something that's beneficial for agriculture. And the downside is that because these are really industrial wastes masquerading as something that's supposed to be good for the soil, what we have witnessed instead as fish kills. And so this is just a picture from last summer of 2022, where somebody a farmer was applying in these soil amendments thinking that they were going to be good for their farming practice, but instead there was a spill of all these soil amendments in liquid form that led to a large fish kill in the eastern part of Georgia. So this is something we've also been watching for a number of years. Again, there's a QR code there. You can kind of learn a little bit more about this particular issue. And finally, one of the issues that the Water Coalition has been working on since at least 2016 is coal ash. And coal ash is the byproduct of the burning of coal to generate electricity. Unfortunately, current law doesn't really provide enough protection for our groundwater from coal ash contamination. In kind of a real quick explanation here, we would burn coal to generate electricity. The ash that was left over from the burning of that coal would then be effectively dumped into a pit in the ground. Sometimes that pit was also full of water. What we learned, in the kind of, around 2010, 2015, we had a couple situations nationally, not in Georgia, where coal ash, large amounts of coal ash ended up in rivers in Tennessee and in North Carolina, because we discovered that this storage technique of just putting coal ash in large pits, often filled with water, right on the riverbanks, that these pits could sometimes leak large volumes of kind of catastrophic leaks of large volumes of ash into these rivers. And so there is a program in the state of Georgia and other states that is designed to store this coal ash safely. However, we've determined that really coal ash landfills need to be built and constructed in a very particular way. Otherwise, you can have kind of heavy metals and other toxic constituents from the coal ash can end up leaking into groundwater as well as in the surface water. So for the last couple of years, we've worked on a couple of different bills, including House Bill 564 to require coal ash landfills to be designed in a particular way that would be more protective of water. Unfortunately, that bill has not been able to move forward for a variety of reasons. But again, there's another QR code that has more information about coal ash and the things that we've been working on there. So that is really kind of the wrap up there of how to think about who your decision makers are, how to find them. Once you find them, how to think about setting up a meeting, and then how to actually move through a meeting. And then, kind of give you some information about the Georgia Water Coalition. It's a statewide organization that we're involved with, and how you can be involved as well. And then just kind of, talk you through a couple of different issues that the Water Coalition has been working on. The Okefenokee is really the one that is kind of, front burner, top level, in some ways, most ripe for work on. And so I'd encourage you to pay attention to that particular issue, as well as the others that I talked about tonight. But with that, I'm happy to take any questions that y'all might have. So feel free. Ask away.
Feel free to unmute yourselves if you want to ask a question, or type it into the chat. And if you need the slideshow afterwards, let us know. Shoot me an email and I'll get a copy for you guys.
I'm happy to share that.
Okay, well, thank you guys for attending. Thank you, Chris. If everybody could just give him like a little thumbs up or round of applause to say thank you. We appreciate you taking time out of your evening, and everybody, I hope you guys have a great rest of the week and weekend. Thank you for taking time out of your evenings. I know you guys are busy and all. So thank you, Shannon, and everybody. Chris, thank you again. But
You're welcome. Glad to do it.